edit it, throw it out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Hi, we're in Spain. We're on a summer retreat, a Wim Hof summer retreat in Spain, which is amazing. And I'm one of the teachers. And this is Brett. Mm-hmm. And Brett is what's your last name, by the way?
Anderson.
Anderson, Brett Anderson. Mm-hmm. And Brett is in my group. Yeah, so there's 100 people here, and there's 4 groups of 25, and each group has 2 instructors. And Brett is in my group. And we were talking about the science of physiology, and I really like that part, and I'm very aware that the more you know, the less you know, like there's so much to learn. So I'm always, my private agenda in a week like this is, I'm here to help people, but it's very much also to become a better teacher. And what's your job in the United States?
Originally, I was trained as a chiropractor.
Yeah.
And I've been in practice for 18 years. And probably about 7-8 years of being in practice, I went back to school and studied with the Carrick Institute. And the Carrick Institute is functional neurology.
Okay, so can I say you're a neurologist then?
I'd rather have that functional neurologist because there is a difference.
Okay.
So we look at things, how they're working. Are they working? Are they working? Mm-hmm. Are they working correctly? Yeah. 100%. Mm-hmm. And what level of the nervous system is or isn't working correctly? Uh-huh. Where a neurologist would be more conditions, diagnosis, and then treatment. Mm-hmm. Where we try to, if there's a weakness, we try to strengthen it up, try to build it up, and it's totally possible, and I see it every day. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, like we talked already yesterday on a very busy terrace, which was very noisy, and I get sometimes comments on my YouTube videos that the sound is not so good, so maybe, this is relatively silent here, but maybe, we will make it as good as possible. And for me, it's really interesting to talk to you because you're the scientist, and I'm just starting with understanding this whole science and physiology. Mm-hmm. And what I have often with Wim is he's a good friend, and he's very all over the place once in a while, bam, 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 and he's very intuitive. Mm-hmm. But my brain blocks sometimes that he says stuff, and I'm like, well, you can say that, but I'm not sure if this is like really possible actually. And the point where I want to go to is that, as I understand it, we use 5 to 10% of our brain, something like that. Mm-hmm. Wim is talking about 16%. I don't know where he get that figure, but say 5 to 10%. And he's claiming that we are able to use 100%, which is an amazing idea because if you've seen the film Limitless, for example. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this is where you start to use 100%, you become like this superhuman, and I honestly feel this is like the next evolutionary step. Mm-hmm. First is where single organisms, single cells became complex cells. That was a huge step in evolution. The second was when life went from water to earth. And this is, we're like the highest organism on the earth, but if we start to use 100%, this may change the whole world. We might actually, if we are able to do that, we might actually understand, globally that we should take care of each other and change the world and clean up the earth and stuff like that. Absolutely. So that's my dream, basically. But then, so I asked you yesterday, I'm going to ask you this again. This idea that we can use 100% of our brain. Mm-hmm. You as a scientist, basically, or a neurologist or functional neurologist, what is your view on this? Is this possible?
Well, the way I would look at it is, and I would explain it, is that we actually use 100% of our brain. Mm-hmm. Everyone uses 100%. Mm-hmm. It's what matters is a term called central integrative state.
Central integrative state. Okay.
So you can have a 100% central integrative state, and you can have, say, 1%. You obviously want to be at 100% central integrative state, and what that means is basically every cell and part of the brain is working together. Mm-hmm. It's healthy. It's getting Sorry, there's bees all over here.
Trying to stay relaxed, you know.
They're well connected. They're doing their job to 100% of their functional capacity. So you can't not use 100% of your brain. Everybody uses 100%. It's just whether or not that they have a good brain. If they don't have a good brain, then they're going to be some dysfunction, disease. They're not going to expressing their humanity 100%. So the old term was, oh, you use 5% and 10%. It really should be your potential of your brain, because you can't, every part of your brain fires. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about is, so you need two things for the neuron or for the brain in general. You need stimulation and fuel.
Right.
The fuel is oxygen and glucose. And that's it. You can take it all the way down to the single neuron, and if it doesn't get stimulation or fuel, the nerve or this neuron will die.
So fuel is oxygen, breathing, and glucose, food, right? And then a stimulation. Stimulation. Yeah.
So
what's that?
Stimulation is everything that we receive from our environment.
Right.
Whether that's seeing, hearing, touching, moving, that's all being sent into the brain, processed, integrated, and then we create a response to that. So a good example, here's a good example. Say if you're born blind, or what they do, actually the experiment is they'll take cats and they'll actually cover one eye. The neurons, so they're born with the neurons in their occipital lobe. If they're born blind and they're kept blind for a period of time, those neurons will actually change into something else. They will not be able to see when they remove the patch. So there's no stimulation. And that's not the best example of what we just talked about as far as the cell dying, but if the cell doesn't get input, it either dies or in the beginning will change.
Or it will be used for something else. Right?
But as we age and we get, we grow, that if you don't use it, you will absolutely lose it. That really holds true for the nervous system.
Okay.
And it happens fast. It happens very fast. Are you familiar with the term neuroplasticity?
Yes, I am actually. So can you explain it shortly?
That is neuroplasticity. So if you stimulate a nerve, you give it good fuel, and you connect it, you stimulate it with something else, you can change that cell.
Because often in or like in the pseudoscience spiritual world, it is said that like changing your belief system, it takes a while, because if you have been thinking for like 30 years in a certain pattern, there's like this has become a highway, and if you want to change that, you change your thought, you're making a new highway, and it takes time for that old highway, that old habit or that old belief system to die off.
Right. Now there are two pathways for that, and I'm going to be honest, I don't remember there's two receptors basically, and one is the slow general changing over time. Now think of an experience that you had in the past that really sticks out, that was like really intense, like just blew your mind, kind of like coming here. We experience WIM, we experience this breathing, it's very intense.
So can you tell me like your experience is a bit like side path, but so Wim Hof method, right? Breathing, cold training, ice bath, and mindset training basically.
Well, for me, it's really interesting because it's, again, if we only need two things, we need to stimulate and fuel. The whole week is about that, because the breathing is all about getting more oxygen into the brain, into the body, and the stimulation is the cold baths. So when you sit down in that cold bath, and especially that first time, you get this barrage into your parietal lobes, and your brain is just lighting up like fireworks from that. So when that happens, you need more fuel, So you increase blood flow into the brain.
Uh-huh.
Same thing with the brain stem where the respiratory centers are located.
Yeah.
As we're breathing, we're consciously breathing, we're lighting up those areas, and as you increase demand, you increase blood flow. And that will create that neuroplasticity. Now we're doing it very intense, we're doing it every day, multiple times a day, we're having these other adventures, these exciting adventures, so it becomes even, the change is faster. And there is a special nerve, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name of it.
It's all right.
But think of like, the first time you fell in love, that it's, and you meet the love of your life, like it's so intense.
Yeah.
And that's something that it's immediate, it's powerful.
Yeah, and those are those, because I forget a lot in my life, but there are some parts of my life that I still remember what I was wearing, how it was smelling, and that, everything.
That and I can't believe I can't remember the name. It's I want to say NMDA receptor.
All right.
Is the one that gets activated, and then there's another receptor, but don't hold me to that.
But back to the brain. So this is how I understood it. Like the oldest part of our brain, our brainstem, right? Or the oldest part is called the reptilian brain.
Well, we would call that the brainstem.
The brainstem.
And then you have the brainstem's broken down into from, let's go top to bottom. We have the midbrain or the mesencephalon.
Yeah.
Then you have the pons, and then the medulla. That makes up the brainstem, and then under the medulla becomes the spinal cord that runs along your spine.
Yeah, and then the second part is like the mammal brain, right?
So as we go a little bit further up.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can go. So depending on how far you want to go, but we would come into the thalamus. And then I know we talk a lot this weekend about the hypothalamus, which it lives right underneath that.
Yeah.
Then you have basically the basal ganglia, you have the limbic system, the cortex.
Yeah.
Basically.
And the neocortex is like the last part, and that's what humans have.
The easiest way to remember that is front to back. So we go newest to oldest and newest to oldest. So the newest is the top. And the front,
exactly.
And then as we go down, it becomes, evolutionary wise, it's older. So if we even look at the brainstem, the medulla is the oldest, the pons, the mesencephalon.
Yeah.
So the further you go up, you get more functions. They become a little bit more advanced, and also in general, it's inhibition top down, front back.
Yeah.
So the mesencephalon will inhibit below, and same thing, that in general.
And then, so if we talk about breathing, because this is the interesting part. Mammals, apart from humans, this is what makes humans special compared to other mammals or other animals. Mammals cannot choose to hold their breath, right? So, like the breath is of course fully autonomic. You don't have to think about breathing, and when you sleep you don't die. It's fully autonomic. But we can consciously, so with our neocortex, make a decision to change our breathing. And you can do this in 3 ways, which is, I have the feeling that we should move the camera a little bit. We can do that in 3 ways. We can breathe faster, which is part of the Wim Hof basic breathing, and then hold our breath. That's another part of the Wim Hof basic breathing. And we can choose to breathe slower, which is like average meditation. And through these really simple tools, we can have like a direct effect on that autonomic part, which is, as I understand it, that oldest, like let's call it the midbrain or the reptilian brain. So that part is where the autonomic nerve system is, and where officially current science is saying like it's impossible to influence that, or you need drugs, basically. That's what the pharmaceutics are of course selling. But so it is true that through these simple techniques you have a direct effect on your inner world, on the part that is officially impossible to influence.
I would agree. Yeah, and the 2 ways we would look at that is first general, central integrative state. That is the most important for anyone to express who they are. Health-wise, mentally, emotionally. If you have a poor central integrative state, then you are not in a state of health.
So you're saying, what if I eat McDonald's every day and I get like really bad nutrition in? Because you're very clear in saying like everything happens in the brain.
Everything.
Right?
Well,
because I think like, yeah, but if I go to sport, I'm actually physically moving, and therefore I release some happy hormones, and this is why I feel good. So it's from body to mind.
right?
But I know, how would you, what would you say about that?
Well, with that, if we look at the brain controls, coordinates, drives the body. It is what it's really in the driver's seat. But what drives the brain is our body.
Yes.
So it's a two-way street. It's
Yeah, exactly.
You cannot have one without the other.
No, I understand.
And that's what we were talking about, stimulation.
Yeah.
So where do we get all of our stimulation from?
Okay,
From
so
our body.
sporting is like a simulation, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so that's
So
really
let's
simple.
say, what sport did you play?
Like yoga, for example.
How about something like a ball type sport?
Yeah,
Soccer?
I played hockey. Hockey. Yeah.
Okay, so
that's
when you-
actually a guy's sport in the Netherlands.
Yeah. So when you first started playing hockey, you maybe weren't the best. You didn't know, you maybe weren't top of the team, but you practiced, you learned, you played with your other teammates, and over time you got better.
Yeah.
So that's neuroplasticity. You changed those cells to get better, to stronger, better connections, more connections. When you do a sport like that, you're using your whole brain.
Yeah.
You're using your frontal, your parietal, your huge cerebellum activities going on, and then everything else. Everything else is involved. You can't not use a part of the brain.
It's funny because I have a very strong opinion, and this is just what works for me, of course, but that if you sport, it's consistency over intensity, and also with breathing techniques.
Yeah.
Every day a little bit gives you like much more result in the end than, going to train one time a week and do like a lot and then have muscle pain for 3 days. So that's my trick, like I do 5 minutes of yoga in the morning and 5 minutes of breathing. If I have time, I do more, or I go to a yoga class, but I don't have to do that. So it's that consistency over intensity is like being friendly to yourself. I did my 5 minutes of yoga, I'm good enough. It's okay, I'm okay. But there's more to this, and that is exactly what you're saying. Like a child learns by playing and by repeating and by taking baby steps. I call it also the power of baby steps.
We call that spatial and temporal. So
Right.
you can have a bunch of stuff at one time, or you can have a little bit over time.
Exactly.
So, and they both have advantages, and some situations one is better than the other.
Yeah.
But something like what you're talking, sports, you're always going to be better. That practice. Yeah.
And then back to breathing. There's this statistic that says 90% of the people use only 30% of their lung capacity. Because we were just talking about the midbrain, it needs fuel, which is glucose, and oxygen. Well,
Yes.
okay, there's the glucose part is like healthy nutrition actually works. It has a relatively slow effect. If you have been eating McDonald's for 20 years and you start cleaning up, you need a few years for. So that's one part. So healthy food is clever, and this is like kicking in an open door, but still. And then the other part is breathing, So if we use 30% of our lung capacity, which is basically breathing high and a little bit fast, you don't get enough oxygen in. And the other side is that if you breathe to the chest only, you're like living most of your life in your fight or flight. Yeah, so there's like two things, fight or flight, also called the sympathetic, and the parasympathetic, that is rest and digest. Yeah, so in a balanced person, this is 50-50. It can never be 50-50.
Right.
because you know, like now we're talking, we want to be a little bit more in the sympathetic, and when we want to go to bed, we want to be more in the parasympathetic. But like on average, 50-50 would be ideal.
Or we could look at it more if we need both of them,
Mm-hmm.
and they both have their place, and they should, in general, one really can't be active while the other is active. And we
Yeah.
talked a lot about digestion. You really want just parasympathetic.
Yeah, so
activity.
digestion, if you're in your fight or flight, your digestive system is shut off.
It's going to be, well, it might not necessarily be
No,
shut off, but it's going to be a
less.
wreck. You know?
And this is so, basically, if you're breathing high and you're living more in that fight or flight or sympathetic, there's a very high chance you're going to get problems with your gut. Right? And then if you start to breathe through the belly, that's like one of the steps you can make to breathe better. You activate more that parasympathetic, which has an effect on your gut. Plus also, if you breathe through the belly, you massage your gut, so it's like a double effect.
Yeah.
But then there's more to it, because if we breathe poorly, you know, like there's this breathing technique. Let's talk about the Wim Hof method, basic breathing, which is, you know, like and this is typically Wim. He just does something. He doesn't think. But the more I know about it, it's so intelligent. So the basic breathing is 30-40 times breathing. Then you take a deep breath in, you breathe out, you like let it go. So it's like atmosphere 1 in your chest, not everything out, but not hold it in. And then you hold your breath for as long as possible, and then if you want to breathe again, you take a deep breath in. It's called the recovery breath, and you hold it for at least 10 seconds, right? So in that 30-40 times breathing, we are going more into our sympathetic, into the fight or flight. And it's kind of, you know, if there would be a truck, you know, like a car accident here in front of here, we would immediately be in our fight or flight. And because of that, we would start breathing faster. And adrenaline is released, your heartbeat goes up and stuff like that. Digestive system is not shut down, but suppressed, so let's say it like that. So what we do with the breathing, we're completely calm, we're lying on the mat, but we start over breathing. So you like engage that fight or flight, while at the same time you're pretty calm.
Well, I would say...
I'm gonna fill you up. You want
Yeah,
another one?
yeah.
First a beer or first a Fanta? Doesn't matter.
What I think the possibility of what's going on is that, and I don't know if we talked about this last night, but I think we did. So your respiratory centers are in your pons and your medulla.
Yeah.
So that's where all respiration happens, as far as control, rate, depth, breathing in general.
Yes.
Happens there. Autonomic control all happens between those two respiratory centers. Absolutely.
Yes.
In that same area, you have what's called the pontomedullary reticular formation. The job of that pontomedullary reticular formation is it goes down into the spinal cord, and it inhibits a part of the spinal cord called the IML.
Yeah.
The IML is what controls the sympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
So now, if you have a better central integrative state,
Yeah.
that's your first step. Now, you're stimulating the pons and the medulla through your breathing.
Yeah.
So now you're going to get an increase in blood flow to that area.
Mm-hmm.
So all the cells around there and all the nuclei around there are also going to get the same blood supply. So they're going to kick up. So now they're going to be functioning better. They're going to have those neurons themselves in the pons and the medulla are going to be stronger. They're going to be functioning 100%. Maybe not 100%, but they're going to have more mitochondria. They're going to have more protein being built inside their cells. So if you have more mitochondria, each cell has more energy in the brainstem, and if you have more protein, you have better structure, you have better organs in the cell, so they're just going to perform that much better. So if they're performing better, they're going to have that PMRF is going to function better.
What is PMR?
Pontomedullary reticular
sorry.
formation. it's going to function better. So it's going to have better control of the IML or better inhibition of the IML, which will have less sympathetic activity.
Okay.
So you'll have better gut function. You'll have better heart. You better blood vessel. Everything that you were in that sympathetic fight or flight will flip over, and you'll have better control of your body.
And then, so by basically, like having a bit of a normal diet and doing breathing techniques, it's especially those breathing techniques, apart from the stimuli of an ice bath, and that's like a separate story. So maybe we should, yeah, because like we don't want to make this a 2-hour video. Although, I can talk about this for hours. So by doing these breathing techniques, you get to increase, the oxygen level, the blood flow in your brain. So it is like theoretically possible to use 100%.
Again, we always use 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
It's more, is that 100% good? Are you using it to your maximum capacity?
Yeah. So if you have poor oxygen levels in your brain, what happens? Yeah.
Disease, and poor function. You name it. If you're, we could go through a whole list of things that happen because poor brain function, all the way from general back pain, vestibular balance disorders, migraines, digestion, anything digestive. And then you can even take it a step further because of the pituitary, the pineal, the hypothalamus, they're all in the brain, they're making hormones. So now you get into a whole nother range of health problems.
Yes.
So it's not so much that you're going to cure those, but if your brain is functioning right, those things won't be a problem. So
you're actually saying that if your brain functions poor, apart from, like you have less concentration, all that stuff that is pretty much very logical, but if your brain functions very poor, this is where autoimmune illnesses are coming from. That is very interesting. So, if we are able to make the blood flow better and have enough oxygen and enough glucose and the right stimuli, you can prevent, let's say prevent and not heal, because that's like a big, but let's start with, you can prevent autoimmune illnesses by having a daily breathing practice and having like a bit of a normal diet and, not watching too many aggressive Hollywood movies, for example, that's really simple. We could almost say any chronic disease, you could, by having a good functioning brain, most chronic diseases will, not that we're going to eliminate them 100%, no, but you're in a much better place. 80% is good enough. I'll take 80%. Yeah, absolutely. So then the next step would be, if you have an autoimmune disease, could it be helping to do like daily breathing practice, and is it possible to like heal it, get over like a autoimmune disease by having the right stimuli again, a bit of good normal nutrition, and increase that oxygen level and the blood flow in your brain? It's just opinion, We're not stating here like any. It's just theoretically. I would extend that out to any disease. If you have a good functioning brain, you're in a much better place to heal, because your brain controls and coordinates every function in your body. So whatever it is, if your brain is 100%, you're going to have close to 100% function in your body. Now if it's something genetic, if it's something that you were exposed to, well, yeah, of course, that's not going to happen. No, okay. But in general, we're constantly bombarded with stress. Yeah. Cell phones, diet, the list goes on and on, and that's all going to affect our bodies, and it's going to affect our brains. So if we can have a good functioning brain, we're going to have a much better chance of tamping that down, fending it off, not being able to cope with that stress. And that's stress. We all know stress is the number one thing that leads to most diseases, chronic diseases. Yeah, I personally, I don't believe in stress, because stress is just being out of your comfort zone. Someone like you or myself, we seek it because we know that's where we grow. Yeah, exactly. But most people, when
they don't like their job. They come home and watch TV. They eat processed foods.
Yeah.
They're taking drugs. They're maybe drinking too many beers. So that's just going to bring that whole system down. It's you're not functioning 100%. And if you start with your brain, the body will absolutely follow. It's almost impossible to not, because again, it's a two-way street. The brain drives the body, but the body drives the brain.
Yeah.
So you can't have one without the other.
No. And it's really interesting that just a simple and then consistency over intensity, a daily breathing exercise could really help. And
absolutely.
I'm healthy. You're healthy too, right? You're
I mean, I got some. I'm happy to be here. I had a really good week. I'm definitely going to take what I learned here home, because this was the first thing that I've been searching for this, because the only other way that we would get more oxygen into the body was to take oxygen.
Yeah.
And that was maybe good while you were you had the mask on, but you take it off and you're done.
Yeah.
So this is something I can do every day.
Yeah.
This is something that I can teach patients how to do.
Yeah.
I can teach my family how to do.
Yeah.
It's something we all can do, and I can tell you from my experience this week, I know 100% it's the real deal. It's effective.
Yeah.
And this is the fifth day. And we were also talking about neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
From day one to today, my breathing has changed.
Yeah.
Like
And
I've been able. I feel like I'm actually breathing now, and I can physically see the difference, feel the difference.
And that is a really interesting thing, and this is what women's always like hammering on, is that how do you learn to breathe? I'm gonna ask them to be a bit silent. Hey, Chris, een beetje zacht zijn. We zijn een filmpje aan het opnemen. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. No, I asked the Dutch guys. Well, first of all, the super cool thing is that we have our breath with us all the time, and we don't need like an oxygen machine or whatever, pills or whatever. That's number one. But the other thing that I wanted to say was I kind of lost it. Focus. I don't know. No, blank. Like not thinking is so easy. I remember like women's like hammering on like, people are asking me like, okay, learning to change your autonomic nervous system, like how many years does that take? It's like, it starts now. Today you're learning that.
Yeah.
And what we do here is pretty intense. You get a lot of stimulus.
Well, what he also said, and I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's good, yeah.
He said, we do it 4 times. He said it might take 40 times.
Yes.
It might take 80 times.
Yeah.
And that, everyone's an individual, and everyone is at a different stage.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I had experiences on day 2. And talking with some of my campmates there, they weren't having the same experience, but each person has their own experience. They each have, we also talk about the metabolic capacity of a nerve. So say if we're looking just at the pons and the medulla, they may, and say if you've had years of chronic illness,
yes,
your metabolic capacity might be here.
Yes.
So what that means is that you can only stimulate those cells so far before it becomes too much. And in the nervous system, as a general rule, is if you overstimulate the cell beyond its metabolic capacity, the nerves will crash.
Okay.
And then you go into a recovery period, or you have some type of dysfunction. A great example, I think, that we all know is a migraine. So the cells get overstimulated, then they crash, then you have a headache, you don't like light, you don't like sound, you want to be left alone, you have that fog around. And really what that is that's just the cells in that recovery period. And that's, again, going back to what he said, it might take somebody 40 times, 40 sessions to get to that level.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know how long they've been in that state.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, like you do yoga, you're active, your diet's good, you're breathing. So, you know, it might, you're functioning a little bit higher than, you know, someone who's never been exposed to this, someone that doesn't care about their diet or just getting into, you know, trying to change who they are and change their health.
Yeah, I notice it in energy, you know, like, yes, I do have a lot of energy, but that is just doing little things, but every day, you know, and that it works for me basically. But then are you saying, you know, like, and again, you know, we're not promising anything, but if you would have an autoimmune illness then, and if you would change, you know, like your breathing and your stimuli, that you could actually, like migraine, you know, like I know people with migraine, and it's basically if you have migraine, you're screwed, and there's nothing that you can do about it, you know. But is it possible that if you would have a daily practice that you can get over migraine, and it, you know, like from your perspective?
Oh, that's a tricky question.
Yeah, I know.
And the only reason is because
We don't want to promise anything.
well,
you
just
know?
as a chiropractor, going back to, you know, my core of who I am as a profession, we don't heal. The body heals itself. So we have interventions and we try to have the body function as best as it can, so it can heal itself. So same thing with the migraine as an example. If the cells are good, and usually the migraine is mesencephalon or maybe cortex usually involved.
Yeah.
So if those cells are good, if the cells in those areas are strong, they are functioning, they have stimulation and good fuel, and they're good, strong, and that's what we didn't talk about. We'll go into that. If they're strong, the likelihood that you're going to have a problem is much lower.
Yeah.
Again, everyone's a little different. There's always a genetic variation. There's always, you know, everybody has different variables going on. But in general, yes, you're expressing those symptoms because there is something wrong with those cells. So now if we can drive oxygen into them, they're going to be healthier. It's almost like they're going to get a power boost and they're just going to rev their engines. The cells love that. They need that. I mean, two things: fuel and stimulation. That's we would think it would be more.
Yes, it's so simple.
But that's it.
And then the core of the problems is, you know, apart from diet, is like a lack of oxygen on certain parts, basically. So breathing is just, you know, I think the breathing world, and not only Wim Hof, because you have pranayama, you have Buteyko, you have like transformational breathing, stuff like that. And the Wim Hof method is the most intelligent because it uses, you know, like breathing faster and holding your breath.
It's the most direct.
Yeah.
It's really gets it right into the system. I don't think there's another system that drives it in faster. And I've felt that. I think quite a few other people have felt that this week. You know, it's intense. It's definitely intense. It's not hard. It's just
that's
intense.
Nice, intense but not hard.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I think anyone can do it.
Yeah.
And everyone should be doing it.
Well, we see here, you know, like there's this guy Mark in our group. He's 72, and Catherine. You know, I'd never ask ladies for their age, but it's probably something the same.
And the same.
And,
my
and
son's
very
here.
skinny. And your son is
He's
how old?
16.
Oh, he's 16. I thought he was 18.
Yeah.
Hey, Quint, I thought you were 18.
Yeah. So we have the range, and you know, if we can get kids like him doing it, that just puts them in a better position to think better, live healthier. You know, it could really change the world just by breathing. I really think a lot of us don't breathe, and and when I say that, we just don't breathe properly or to a level that is beneficial for our brain.
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes a day, like you said, you do 5 minutes a day.
Yeah, but then like that's what Wim said also. Like, so I get this message on YouTube. I'm doing your 4 rounds per day, but will this help my arthritis rheumatoid? And he's like, well, if you have a problem, do it like 10 times a day. Like spend like 2-3 hours on breathing, because you wanna. It's exactly as you said, the metabolic rate is like at 20%. Mm-hmm. If you want to increase that to like 80 or 90 or possibly 100%, like if you have a problem, better work on it. Like it is not coming, like, oh, so you're, like I do this and then I breathe like that, doesn't work, that method is stupid. You gotta engage with it and really do it, and and still no promise. We're almost, it's a fine line where you don't want to promise, but we did prove, and you also acknowledge it, that you are able to influence your autonomic nerve system at will just by breathing techniques.
Yeah.
And if we can heal, that is of course dependent on the consistency and then also on the intensity of the person breathing and how much effort you put in it. Mm-hmm. But theoretically, it is possible.
It's beyond theoretically, yeah.
Yes.
The point is, though, I think it's not that you do it one time and
you're healed.
Yeah, like oh look at that.
Give me that pill.
it might take you, like we said, it might take you a year. But each time you do it, you're moving closer and closer and closer. You're building. We don't know how. We can't look into the cells and know how. But the term is transneural degeneration. So when a cell isn't stimulated, and to a certain extent doesn't have good oxygen and glucose, the fuel, it goes into what's called transneural degeneration.
Okay.
And basically, it's just the flip side of a healthy cell. So if you have good stimulation, you have good fuel delivery, you're going to have good mitochondria and you're going to have good protein. The protein creates the structure of the cell, the organelles of the cell, and it also sets the ion balance within a cell. And I believe it's a negative ion within the cell.
Right.
Okay? So now you don't have those. You have a poor functioning cell. Now you have less energy for the cell. You have less mitochondria. Mitochondria is what produces ATP through the glucose.
Yeah. So
through oxygen.
Yeah. So in the mitochondria, oxygen and glucose come together. It becomes ATP, energy, the energy carrier, and plus CO2 and water. Right.
That's the powerhouse of the cell.
Yeah. Exactly.
So now you have less energy for the cell, then you have less protein, so you have less structure, the integrity of the cell is compromised, you have less organelles, so there's all these things that
basically this.
Yeah. And then what happens is that ion balance changes, and as that ion balance changes, I believe it goes from the negative ion to a positive, which causes the cell to swell, and then eventually leads to cell death. But again, there's probably 1 million phases within that.
Of course. We don't know everything.
Yeah. And you might be here. You might be, functioning 20%. Yeah. It's still working. You still have it, but it's not 100%. Yeah. So now you put fuel in there. You start moving. You start stimulating it. It starts to get a little stronger. Maybe after, again, we said 40, 80 sessions of getting that oxygen, because it's not like we have oxygen today and we don't need it tomorrow.
Yeah.
We need it every day for the rest of our lives. So if we can keep on pushing that oxygen in there, you're only helping the cell. You're only helping the nervous system. And again, we go back to that central integrative state. So when we look at the brainstem, or even specific to the pons and the medulla, it has pathways going up into the cortex, into the thalamus, It also has pathways going down. We already talked about the PMRF, the pontomedullary reticular formation, but it has connections up into the hypothalamus.
Of course.
It has connections up into the thalamus.
Yeah.
So if that part starts to function better, well then it's going to be able to have better connections down the line.
It basically has a ripple effect.
Yeah,
Right.
we call it diaskesis, but it really is wherever you are in that line of connections. Say if there's 5 connections and there's one in the middle, and that middle one's bad. Well, everyone after that is going to be bad.
Yeah.
And the reason is because if you have the bad one in the middle, you have less stimulation.
Yeah.
So less stimulation, you start to go in transneural degeneration,
Yeah.
and this whole process kicks in. So once you start to put that spark into one part of the brain, the connections up and down are also getting better. They're getting more stimulation, so they get more blood flow. They get more demand of oxygen, fuel, so they start to get a little stronger. And it just ripples out, like you said.
And you know, like I can imagine, I'm so happy that I'm healthy, but I can imagine if you have like a problem where basically any autoimmune illnesses, basically the doctors are saying like, okay, you're screwed and here's pills for the pain, but we cannot really help you. You're in this, you know, like this, you're just going down. And by starting to breathe properly, you can make this movement then suddenly.
Yeah.
And I think the funny thing is that you quite fast notice already improvement of energy or whatever, better skin or faster healing of, you know, like little things. So that is a cool thing, that we cannot promise that it works. We can theoretically, you know, define that it actually might work, and I'm very grateful for this conversation.
Or we can probably promise that it's going to do something.
It's
and
going
it's
to do something
positive.
Exactly, and it
And
doesn't
something you
have
need.
and it doesn't have side effects. And the side effects are positive.
All the side effects are positive. Yeah.
You know, and of course through a breathing technique, I don't know if you experience that, but I have that. You know, like if I do like an intense breathing technique, you know, there's tears coming from my eyes and something from my past passes by, and I'm crying or whatever. You know. Of course, that stuff is passing by, but that is also, I see that as a positive thing, because you know, you're like getting over your shit, basically, you know, simply said. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, I've been really impressed. It's definitely something that I've been looking for, and I have to tell you, everything Wim's saying, I haven't found any holes in it.
You haven't?
No, and
That's
like,
nice.
I mean, he might say we only lose 15% of our brain, but when I hear that, that's the central integrative state. That's just the brain is not functioning 100%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's all.
But
But
so that's
doesn't,
what we mean with that.
yeah, but that's not something that he's telling the truth. He really is. What he's putting out there is pretty solid.
And you know, he's a dropout of school, and you know, he's a crazy guy, but he has it by the right end. And it happened a lot that, and I learned now to, you know, like I have my opinion ready, of course, very Dutch. He's saying something, I'm like, well, you know, like, don't sell me, you know, like. But every time I notice that sometimes it's an hour later or a week or a month later, like, damn, he was right again, you know. And he's claiming pretty intense stuff.
Yeah.
But then talking to you, it's not just hippie talk, you know, or a spiritual, you know, believe in it and you will be healed.
I mean, you can find this in any textbook. Like
Of course.
What we were talking about today, like, that's just general neuron theory. It's you know, in the thickest textbooks there are. That's how you learn. You know, and that's just how the brain functions. It's so simple. You know, it's the most complex thing in the universe, but it's so simple. It needs fuel and stimulation.
Yeah.
I mean, what could be simpler than
Yeah,
that?
exactly. Is there anything you wanna say you haven't said, you feel like
No, I think we covered a lot. I mean, it's.
Yeah, man. I'm
I'm really excited. I'm excited for
Yeah.
myself. I'm 45, so you start to think this time is
Yeah.
when health has the potential to go down.
Exactly.
But I think this is something I'm going to take home, and I'm going to definitely do every day
So-
because.
Yeah. So that's actually a really good point you're saying. Like, so do you think that through breathing techniques we can, stop the aging process or potentially reverse it? Of course, if you're like really down and you're burnout and you're in bed, it can help. But in general, can we like extend the telomeres in the cells by adding oxygen? Do you think?
I would say, for me, and again, that I'm probably coming from a very specific point of view, is I think we can use it to fully express our humanity, fully express who we are, fully be a healthy 45-year-old. Can I add years? Maybe, I don't know. But I want to function as best as I can now.
Like get the most out of your humanity.
Yeah, and when I go, I'll tell you, this happened, it was the last time we came home. We came home from Spain, and the people in Spain, that's where we are right now, they're special. They really are. And
I think so too. I love them. Yeah.
And I got off the plane in New York, and everybody was just, they were so weighted, like they were so stressed, and you could almost see the anger.
Yeah.
I don't want to live like that.
No.
And I want to make sure I have energy to play with my kids, and I have energy. I sleep good, and I want to experience the world that we're in.
I got it. I'm living in Amsterdam, which is like a very small city, a bit with a New York vibe. Like, don't try to tell me what to do. So that's very similar. So I feel very much at home in New York, but in New York it's very sympathetic. People are really very stressed and impatient.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm going to New York, actually. Unplanned, but 13, 14 July in New York. So that's like, I probably publish this next Saturday in exactly a week. So if you've been looking up to now and you are in New York, we do a full weekend, Saturday and Sunday, at the Assemblage Nomad in somewhere downtown near Wall Street.
Yeah, awesome. Very good.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? Do you have?
No, at this moment not. But I hope that we can have another conversation, maybe, because I know out of this conversation I will have questions, and there's I would love to talk about the stimuli of cold training, for example. But I think the video is now long enough.
Yeah.
But either maybe tomorrow or otherwise, I want to ask you to maybe do like on a distance, a Skype or a Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And we just talked about normal function. We just talked about what's happening and what's going on, and there's so many directions that we can go with this.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'd be great.
Cool, man.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hope you liked it. Leave a comment if you have a question. Then maybe we can address that. And
Yeah, sure.
thanks for watching. Talk to you
Thank you.
later. Bye.